This video is brought to you by Incogni. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they are providing to the entire upper echelon community. Alright, how many people watching this have heard of a company called Humane? Yes, no, maybe? To be fair, most people probably haven't, but you possibly should have, because apparently Humane, with its AI wearable pin, was, no joke here, the smartphone killer, or at least that's what we were supposed to believe. Let me give context here, because talking about a piece of technology like the Humane AI Pin is really only possible with a complete picture, and the complete picture, so to speak, is utterly ridiculous. I'll start with this. May 9th, 2023, after a shrouded and extremely secretive development cycle, the official TED Talks YouTube channel uploads a video where Imran Chowdhury, co-founder of the company Humane alongside Bethany Bongiorno, does a seminar introducing a highly scripted demo of the wearable AI pin from Humane, which they're about to sell, for $700 a piece. It's really just a cringeworthy and highly scripted promotional video requiring the question to be asked, why was this allowed to be a TED Talk in the first place, where he demonstrates some of the supposed capabilities of the pin and generates overall hype for it. But I think it's important to also highlight that this product was raising hundreds of millions of dollars in the background, with certain executives claiming a billion-dollar valuation for the startup as a result of its, quote, grand promises, end quote. I'm talking about major investors, by the way. LG Technology Ventures, Microsoft, Volvo, Tiger Global, Qualcomm, even Sam Altman from OpenAI, among many others. Humane raised something like $230 million total from numerous different funding rounds, and I have to believe that a large part of why they were able to do this was because the founders, Imran Chowdhury and Bethany Bongiorno, were ex-Apple engineers who allegedly helped develop everything from the original Mac to the iPhone and now the Apple Watch. Investors, of which there were many, had to be thinking something along the lines of, they did it once, maybe they can do it again, because notable engineers from Apple now pivoting into the business of AI wearables at the absolute apex of the hype cycle for that technology, well, it's kind of a perfect storm, wouldn't you say? Just to hammer that point home, by the way, Time magazine in October of 2023 named the Humane Pin one of the best inventions of the year, with a title reading, quote, rethinking the smartphone, because even the co-chairs of Time magazine, Mark and Lynn Benioff, as stated under the article, were investors in this project. Sure, there were some red flags, like how during the TED demo he asks the pin, can I eat this, about a chocolate bar that he pulled out of his pocket, and the pin says, you may want to avoid it because of the cocoa butter, since he's allergic, I guess, to something in the cocoa butter, which instantly made me think of the time that Meta implemented AI agents into a bunch of Facebook groups, one of them being a group about outdoor foraging, and then the AI immediately started telling people how to cook, prepare, and eat poisonous mushrooms, which is insane on its face. So asking a $700 AI pin what you can and can't eat because of allergies is a bit of a red flag, I'd say. But mostly it was a hyped up product, a smartphone killer to be precise, from ex-Apple engineers with the backing of Silicon Valley. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it turns out everything can go wrong, and it did, because sometimes replacing the long-standing, carefully developed, and extremely effective technology that everyone currently uses with spur-of-the-moment hyped-up vaporware isn't really the best business model. But still, even with a bad product, a bad business model, widespread product recalls, and overwhelming commercial failure, you can apparently still sell your company for over $100 million, brick the technology for all of your customers, and then move on to a new company with a 30 to 70% bump in salary, plus stock options. Because, yay, Silicon Valley entrepreneurship. Fantastic. Before going further, basically the entire online world revolves around data, obviously particularly your data, which is now being used for everything from training large language models to spam phone calls and telemarketing scams. A lot more than that, obviously, but those are the kinds of things that directly impact you right away when your data starts getting sold around. Most people are completely careless with their information. It's almost impossible not to be, for that matter. I don't blame them. Every single service that you use is almost purpose-built to gather data on top of whatever the actual normal function is, which means that for everyday users, it's not really possible to do anything about it. There's hundreds of data brokers out there predicating their entire business model on harvesting and selling information about you, and that's where Incogni comes in. Simple process, quite straightforward. Sign up for the website, give them specific legal permission to work on your behalf, and let them know what the information is that they'll be having removed. After that, they go and they do it. Aggregating the service lets them streamline the process, and you'll see results almost immediately. Less data brokers and third-party marketing companies who have your information means less spam, less hassle, and most importantly, less potential for data breaches. Using the link down below in the description and code Echelon at checkout, you can get 60% off an annual subscription to Incogni. Again, link down below and promo code Echelon for 60% off your subscription. Big thank you to Incogni for continuing to sponsor the channel. Okay, let's get to it. Humane was a hype factory above all else. Numerous times over the span of 2023 and beyond, they made grand and compelling promises about the value that this pin would provide to everyday users, reflected in the tens of millions of views that they were receiving across all their social media profiles, and the never-ending parade of media coverage in tow. But when the day finally came and the pin finally launched, it was universally criticized. For starters, directly contradicting many of their initial claims, the pin's battery would die out within just a couple of hours. To solve this, the company was selling extra backup batteries and a charging case, which increased the total cost associated with the pin dramatically. But the charging case, in October of 2024, was the subject of a consumer product safety recall because the lithium batteries were a safety and fire hazard. Interestingly, Humane issued their own stop use notice for the battery charging pack in June, blaming it all on a third-party vendor, of course. They had nothing to do with it. How could they ever be guilty? But the product recall in October estimated roughly 10,000 units in particular, which was probably all of the products that were out in the wild at that time, because the pin was not only selling poorly from the start, it was being returned and refunded faster than it was able to sell new units. According to reporting from The Verge, quote, Humane's daily returns are outpacing sales, end quote, with an estimation that by June, only 8,000 units hadn't been returned, which means that this supposed billion-dollar company, Time Magazine's best invention of the year, one of them anyway, an Apple-engineered darling product, wasn't even functionally selling anything now. It was just processing returns, refunds, and defective product replacements, and losing money as well. They even started forcing people to answer questions about why they wanted to refund, saying, quote, once you respond, we will cancel your order within 2 business days, end quote. Maybe it was just an innocent feedback request, but I read that like a company that desperately wants to impose barriers in the refund process and stop the bleeding. But wait, there's more, because we're not just talking about a badly managed company, are we? Sure, there's reports from the New York Times about Humane employees who were literally begging management not to release the product because it wasn't ready. But what would you do if you had a hyped up product launch that could never deliver, you sold it into the market before it was finished, and you were now forced to process mass refunds and replacements because of fire hazard defects? What's the logical course of action there? If you said, try and sell my failing company for $1 billion to HP, you would be correct. And that's precisely what Humane allegedly tried to do. Reported by Bloomberg initially, after the horrendous initial product launch, Humane began seeking a buyout from HP at a valuation between $750 million and $1 billion. That seems radically overinflated, no? Considering the state of the company at the time. And yes, it was an outrageous prospect, which wouldn't even be remotely achieved, because when the deal finally got settled, much more recently, as per the HP Investor Relations press release, Humane had been acquired full send, along with its software patents and intellectual property, for $116 million. Now, what struck me about this deal is that it wasn't just the technology. Actually, HP doesn't even seem to want their AI pin in the first place. There's literally no mention of it whatsoever. But what they did mention is, quote, highly skilled technical talent, with a section from Humane co-founders Imran Chowdhury and Bethany Bongiorno that reads, we're excited to join HP at such a pivotal moment in the industry and help shape the future of intelligent experiences. HP's scale, global reach, and operational excellence, combined with our design-led approach, integration technology, and engineering expertise, will redefine workforce productivity, end quote. That is hilarious when you remember that these two co-founders conceptualized and attempted to sell an AI product that their own employees were allegedly begging them to delay after it was hyped up by practically every single major technology media outlet that there is as a smartphone killer, only to then have the charging case be a fire hazard with more refunds than continuing sales, after which they tried to sell the company for upwards of $1 billion and settled for like a tenth of that. I bet they're excited. I would be too if I were a con man and pulled off a scam like that. See, the $700 AI Humane pin is now a paperweight. They gave a very limited amount of time, like extremely limited, as in a 10-day window or you miss out totally, to pursue product refunds before ultimately shutting down their servers and rendering the pin useless. But they also restricted those final refunds at the death knell of the company to purchases from the prior 90 days only. This effectively means that their most loyal customers, the people who bought in early for the most money before they dropped the price from $700 to $500 because very few people were ever buying it, the people who stuck with them through the disastrous launch and beyond, those are the ones most likely to be getting screwed here, the most loyal fans. They're not open sourcing the software because they sold themselves to HP. They're just rendering the products useless after getting paid a ridiculous amount of money by Silicon Valley investors to make something that was never needed, barely even wanted for that matter, and wildly unsuccessful in every conceivable sense of the word. It is one of the best examples that I've seen in a very, very long time of failing upwards. Imagine making something that is utterly useless. Imagine that practically every single person who ever conducts a review of that useless product then criticizes it because it's useless. And imagine that somehow, after compounding that failure with further mismanagement over a multi-month period, basically scraping the bottom as hard as you can, you end up getting a raise, stock options, and a new job at a bigger company. How the hell do I go about failing upwards like that? If I make mistakes, I get screamed at. I don't know. I don't get a promotion. I get screamed at and get like 9,000 angry YouTube comments. But such is life at the epicenter of technological bloat, I suppose. Must be nice to be able to screw up horribly and just have a better career after, like nothing happened. I also catch myself thinking about the prospect of waste on this one too, because these were $700 pins with all sorts of complex components and manufacturing requirements, but now they're just little bricks. All that fancy language like Equinox color scheme and Corning Gorilla Glass Victus and wide-angled optical sensors, it's all nothing. It's all literally useless garbage now to the detriment of every single person who ever bought it, while hundreds of millions of dollars were rearranged for the benefit of, I guess, maybe HP. They probably think that they got a good deal with all the patents and intellectual property, and obviously the founders who got rich off of this. But it's a pretty stunning example of modern electronic waste purely designed to capitalize on tech trends, to the detriment of most everyone else involved. It's certainly not the only example of AI product failures recently, but it feels like one of the more high-profile examples to be sure, showcasing that just because something hits all the major talking points, has institutional backing, and gets hyped up by the media, doesn't necessarily mean it will do anything other than faceplant. Maybe if you try to rethink the smartphone, you have to make something that actually does the things that people need, and to go even more basic with it, I guess, maybe you want to start with something safe and, I don't know, functional. Obviously, Humane went a different direction here instead of doing that, and the company failed as a result. But at the very least, it's a cautionary lesson about buying into and supporting new technologies, because again, the people that suffered the absolute most was everyone who bought in as an early adopter of this supposed technology. That's it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. The video sponsor, of course, big thank you to Incogni, locals in Patreon, monthly memberships, merchandise, social media, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.